Okay. I'm very, very pleased to have been invited to come and tell you about our Bethesda House program, co-supporting women and animals in shelter together. I've listed what I'm hoping to achieve during this presentation. I want to tell you a bit about Bethesda House. I want to talk about our journey in becoming a pet-friendly shelter. And I want to identify some of the thoughts that we believed, or things that we believed were important to consider as we moved across this journey. And I want to talk about our challenges, our successes, and our results to this point in time. Those are my guys, by the way, Jack, Kit Kat, Sadie, and Scully. Just a little bit of nepotism there. Okay, introduction to Bethesda House. I think it's important to set the context of who we are, where we are, what we are, before I talk about the details, because it really matters. First of all, Bowmanville is just east of Toronto, along Highway 2. We're a semi-urban, semi-rural, bedroom-type community to the GTA, with a lot of rural farming roots to the east of us. Durham region is a very large region, so we have to reach out and support women across a large area. We're within, this is lucky and this is important, we're within a half-hour or more drive to 3 sister shelters in Durham region. And this is a key component that we took into consideration when developing our model, but I think it could be worked around. And we have additional shelters, Lindsay, Peterborough, and Coburg, so we're really quite lucky. Durham region has one of the highest rates of domestic violence in Ontario, and this has been for many, many years now. Durham Regional Police Services respond to an average of 21 domestic-related calls a day, and out of those 21 calls, there's an average of 3 charges per day of domestic assault in the region. In 2017, 4 women were murdered in Durham region by their intimate partners. In one situation, the woman who was murdered was 9 months pregnant, and so her partner was charged with the death of the baby as well. And in another situation, the mother, the 2 teenage children who were home with the mother at the time of her murder were murdered as well. So femicide is not unheard of, unfortunately, in Durham. And the 401 corridor is a mecca of human trafficking, unfortunately. So that's important to consider too. Our building. Our shelter building is an old century home that was renovated in 2003 to increase the space of the bedroom capacity. We are funded as an 18-bed shelter, but because of the need for extra beds in the region, of course, we go over capacity, and we actually have enough bed space for up to 24 people when the need arises, which is most often, actually. The colored spaces are the spaces that women can have their animals in shelter. If it's a common area, the animals are expected to be on a leash, regardless of whether they're a lizard or a dog or a cat or whatever. And the white areas are areas that we keep animal-free in the shelter. The living room area is free space after the kids go to bed. In the evening, women can bring their pets and sit and watch TV together, and the animals can be off-leash in that area. And the outside area, we have a small play area that the animals can be off-leash as well. We support about 160 to 185 women, youth, and children each year in our shelter, and another 200 to 300 or more in community outreach programs. We support over 1,000 people each year on our crisis line. So we're busy. basically what that whole file or slide was to say, we're busy. So the presentation of my goal, let me start that again. The goal of my presentation today is to share our journey with the challenges, successes, and results we've experienced. We don't believe that there is a one-size-fits-all model of co-sheltering animals in our building or in any building. I believe it's a journey that each shelter has to take on its own, taking in consideration its resources and its community. We also don't believe that having pets accompany women and their families into shelter is even the only way to reduce the barrier. We understand there are other models that others may choose to follow. We chose to follow a two-pronged approach, and I'm going to get to that, but the main one is the pets in shelter with their people. We do believe the positive results of helping women overcome this barrier, however we do it, as a community, as a country, makes the creative effort of developing and implementing support worthwhile for everyone involved, the women, the animals, and even our community. Women who are supported by their animals through the therapeutic process just end up being able to support themselves better emotionally, psychologically, and are just better prepared to be on their own when they leave the shelters. And we're getting that from the women's mouths themselves. I don't have data to support that, it's anecdotal, but it certainly seems to be something that we need to follow up on. Okay. Our journey. Our journey started out with identifying the trend. We look at how many women we have to turn away from the shelter and the reasons that we have to turn them away. And by turning them away, I mean we don't just dump them, we refer them to other resources, etc. Basically, we're saying that we aren't able to bring them into the shelter at this point in time. Excluding the women that we have to turn away when we are at capacity, the second highest reason was that we weren't able to bring their pets into shelter with them. That trend was increasing. More and more women were calling us, and we were having to say, no, we can't. We started sneaking them in, but I'll tell you about that after. Okay, sneaking in pets and flying by the seat of our pants was step 2. The problem with that was, A, we felt like we were doing something wrong when we knew we were doing something right. And B, it became a question of what's best at this point in time without some oversight or consistency or whatever. So flying by your seat of the pants is good for lesson learning, but eventually you need to get to a little bit more formality. We decided if it's important enough to do, then it's important enough to do right and to do well. So I took it to the board and we talked about it. And with the board's support, we identified Bethesda House as a pet-friendly shelter. We had the whole liability discussion, and again, I'm going to talk about that later too. But the board, I have to give kudos to the board because the board stepped up to the plate, understood the issue, and gave me permission to simply go ahead and do this. And really, an executive director can't do it without board support because there are so many things that are unknown. You need to have the support of your board behind you. We gave confirmation to staff that this was the route our agency was traveling. Some were for it, some were against it. And the statement was, this is where we believe it's right to go, so this is where we're going, okay? Consultation with our sister shelters, because I had already in my mind sort of thought about how this could work, and the 4 groups of us, the 4 shelter agencies, work really well together. And I presented the idea that they could refer women who had pets to come to us, and we could in turn refer women, if they didn't want to come into a shelter where there were pets available, we could refer them to the other 3 shelters. And the other shelters were on board right from the beginning because they were getting requests for service that they couldn't accommodate. And they knew that we were already sneaking pets in, and they knew that we were going in this direction. And it just was a really good, workable relationship. The idea of having one shelter that was pet friendly allowed the women in our community to just have that one more option. And everybody agreed that that was a good idea. So we developed a two-pronged approach that we believed would be best for our region, best considering our situations, our limitations, our resources. I'll tell you about that after too. It sounds like everything is coming after. You still have to pay attention to what I'm saying now though too, please. I'll get to the after stuff eventually. We identified and connected with the resources in Durham region that we believed could help us. We started formal policy development, and that guided our implementation and our transition periods. And our formal policy development, I say, is never written in stone. None of our policies are. We learn as we go, but we started with a set that would sort of formalize what we were doing. And then we go from there, and we consider it a continuous learning and improvement process. So those are the things that sort of highlighted our journey. We then decided that we needed to operationalize with due diligence. I mean, we knew that all along. Let me just see if I can get to here. There are some key components we believed in operationalizing with due diligence. One was that we had to manage risk. People keep telling us about the risk. We needed to reduce liability, and policies must address worst case scenarios and have some plans in place as to what to do when that happened to reduce the risk to everybody involved. Now, you can't predict everything, but you start off thinking, what if? Well, if this happens, this is what we could do. And then you add to the list as the what ifs occur. So nothing, it's not something that we went into saying we have all the answers. We realized that the procedures must consider the needs of both the women we admit to the shelter and their animals, because we have a responsibility for everybody in the shelter, women, youth, children, and animals. We realized that we needed to consider those around that woman and her pets in shelter, and that would be both the other clients and the staff. And we realized that the women in the community who don't want to come to a shelter where animals are present had to be considered. So we were trying to show due diligence in looking at the impact of our program on everybody. We had to acknowledge that in some situations, being in the shelter environment is not optimum for animals. You've got a large animal and you've got a bedroom that's already full, then it probably isn't optimum to have this big dog in the shelter. However, being in the shelter for a short period of time, or even if that is months, is better than the alternative in a lot of situations. So the animal is at least with its family, the family is at least with its animal, it's a time-limited period, they're going to help each other through their journey, and they're going to leave to more optimum environmental setting. And we also needed to consider that partnering with the people in the community is absolutely critical because we can't do it alone. So the two-pronged approach that I told you before I was going to talk about later is here. The pets in shelter has always been our primary goal. And that comes from the history of seeing the value of animals in the therapeutic process or the treatment process. Just to note, someone asked me once, do you only take women who have animals? No, we don't only take women who have animals, but we do take women who have animals. Okay, the second of the two-pronged approach is what we call our Safe Families, Safe Pets Durham foster temporary care program. Didn't say foster care because that conjured up CAS implications for children, so we call it temporary foster care. or temporary care, not foster care. The approach here is that some women may not want to have their animals in shelter as long as they know that the animals are safe until they're ready to leave, simply because they want to focus on what they have to do, the adult people business of finding housing and getting everything done. And sometimes it was just a relief for a woman to say, if you could find me someplace who would just take my animal for the time I'm with you, and then I could take my animal back, that would be really optimum, because I really need to get my energy back so I can look after the animal, and so that I can look after my children, and so I can do this business. That would be optimum. So there is that population that we wanted to take into consideration. We also wanted to take into consideration that there were going to be times when we couldn't take an animal in for whatever reasons. We had 3 Burmese mountain dogs come to our door one day with a woman who was living in her car, and we had a house full and we had no room at that point in time. And sometimes you just need another option. So we set up the Safe Families, Safe Pets program. Our staff and our volunteers from the community, from the animal sector, jointly screen homes, temporary care providers. We get criminal reference checks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then we match animals to them as well. Now, that's not just a Bethesda House program. That's in collaboration with one of our other shelters. So it isn't just Bethesda House staff that take part in this. The other shelters also participate in the management and the oversight of the program, and it's for women in both our shelters. Okay. Not going to talk more about that. So, program policies. No woman will be turned away from our shelter solely because she has a pet or pets. There are times that women are turned away, and I don't use turned away, I don't like that phrase, but I'm not sure how else to describe it. There are times that women with pets are in situations that we can't meet their needs within our program. Women whose primary, who are in blatant psychiatric distress, hallucinations, delusions, people who come to our door that we simply aren't the proper facility to address their primary needs. Even if they have a pet, we can't take them in because we can't provide the primary care to the woman that is needed. So we have turned away women with pets, but not because they had pets. Requests are evaluated on a case-by-case basis, considering both the needs of the animals and the woman or family. They're approved depending on a number of variables. We may or may not be able to accommodate specific animal in the shelter at the time. That's the 3 Burmese mountain dog example. The owner must sign a contract agreeing to our conditions, including but not limited to things like an observation period and a wellness check by a local vet, acceptable care for and control of her animal in shelter and on shelter property, working with us to manage challenging animal behavior, because some behaviors may be challenging and we need to figure out ways to get around them, and we need her to participate in that problem solving. Covering whatever pet costs she can afford during her stay. We have women come to us who are financially viable and are able to cover the pet costs, in which case we ask them to, including the initial wellness check. There are women who come to us with nothing, and at that point in time we look after the costs, or the vets that we have developed partnerships with look after the care. The vets also use the Farley Foundation, so that women often don't have any cost to incur. We're in that situation. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis and work out with the woman whether she's going to be able to continue to care financially for the animal while they're in shelter. Releasing the agency of liability if anything ever happens to her animals while in shelter. Just like people who always are naysaying you can't have animals in shelter because they're going to bite the kids or whatever. Well, what if a kid bites the dog? I mean, we have children in shelter who are periodically acting out behaviorally due to the trauma they have incurred, the liability has to go both ways. And so she has 2 releases of liability, even though the lawyers told us the document isn't worth the paper that it's written on in terms of liability release. We do it because we're trying to do due diligence. The woman needs to know that she will be asked to leave if she breaches the contract. Just like when a woman comes in and there's other types of contracts we might make with them. Not all women have contracts that they're working on, but some women do. Things that they agree to do in return for what we agree to do, and we work together in a partnership under the conditions of that contract. Well, there's a contract about the care of the animals and what they're going to do and what they won't do. We don't allow child negligence in the shelter. We're not going to allow animal negligence either. So there are certain things that are expected to be done. And if the woman is not in the situation or condition to be able to do that, women come to us at the worst time in their lives, and they're vulnerable, they've been victimized, they've been traumatized, and maybe what they just need to do is sleep for 3 or 4 days. Then that's okay, we work with that, right? We help the woman through that. Women may come to us who have no idea how to look after their animals. We had to get a turtle recovery and rescue group in to take a whole aquarium of turtles that a woman came to us with that she had not a clue how to manage, couldn't look after herself at this point in time, and really said, I can't look after these. She didn't know how to look after them, and so we helped her find someone to take them. But we try to educate in terms of animal care, just like we would try to educate in positive parenting. If a woman comes to us with something that is, there's a gap in her understanding of how to look after the animal, just like there may be a gap in understanding how to look after her child who's been traumatized by violence, that we step in and we provide education and information to help them to be able to do that job. So if she understands and can do it, then wonderful. If she understands and isn't able to do it herself, we help her do it. If it's simply uncooperation, is that a word, that she experiences, then we can ask her to leave. And the bottom one is that she has to agree to sign over the rights to the animal, to the shelter, if she abandons them. And we have certain conditions about that, if you're hospitalized and it's not of your control, etc., then we'll look after the animal until, we can connect with you and figure out what to do. So it's not, you're gone 2 days and the animal goes. It's a softer type of approach than that. So pets in shelter. When we were doing the sneaking in, flying by the seat of our pants type thing, I didn't keep data. I should have, never thought of it. 6 years ago, I started keeping data, even though our formal program wasn't in place. And then the last 4 years, our program has formally been in place. Over those 6 years, we've had 58 women come into shelter, and I think it's 49 of them in the 4 years that we've been officially pet friendly. It's about 12 a year. Doesn't sound like very many, but we're sort of proud of ourselves in the sense that it's 49 more women who have come into a shelter than would have come into the shelter if we had to have said no. So I don't know what else to say about that. People who work in the VAW field understand that we have to keep what's called resident days for the ministry, for our funder. So a couple of years ago, even though they don't ask for it, I started submitting pet resident days. It's how many 24-hour periods a woman or an animal is in shelter. So my ministry program supervisor for the Central East region of Ontario now has this data that she has no idea what to do with, and I am saying I think we should get all the shelters to do that who are even sneaking pets in, because otherwise we're not going to get any acknowledgement for the work we're doing in this area. Our community partners are sister shelters. I've already talked about those wonderful women. 2 veterinary clinics who will provide the wellness checks. Immediate attention required is looked after by them. Costs recovered by the women, our agency, the local churches, whoever we can approach to help support the women's needs. We have local animal groomers who will provide grooming for free. Some of the animals come to us in as bad a condition as the women who come to us. You know, the women who come to us in the middle of the night in their nightgowns with no clothes and no documentation and haven't eaten in a couple of days, and their dogs reflect that lifestyle as well, unfortunately. So the groomers are a big help. Pet supply stores to get food and other supplies, and local animal rescue organizations, because they're more well known than us, in terms of animal care. They've got, you know, just shelves and shelves of leashes and toys and cat beds and things like that, and we can always call them and get what we need. So there's transition periods when you go from providing service in one way to providing service in a different way. So there was transition periods for both the staff and the clients, and we dealt with them in similar ways, but different. So for clients, after we made the formal decision that as of today we are a pet-friendly shelter, we had a house meeting to talk about what was happening. We worked with them on their individual concerns. We put temporary measures in place to support them, and we offered to relocate them to another shelter if they chose to do that, and our sister shelters were in line with that. And the types of things they were concerned about was, well, you know, are they going to be running around the hallway all night, or are they going to be barking, or can my kids play in the playground with the animals? Is there going to be dog poop left in the play area? You know, some really concrete things. But in actual fact, nobody actually chose to leave. They all wanted just to stay and see how it would play out. The admission process, once the transition began, was very different in one way, in that we let every person who called us requesting a bed know that we're a pet-friendly shelter, and that coming to the shelter would mean that there could and probably would be animals on site. And if they were okay with that, they'd be asked when they came in to sign a form saying that they were okay with animals here. This is something that they are accepting, that they're coming to a pet-friendly shelter. And that if they didn't want to come into Bethesda House, and their preference was to go to a pet-free shelter, then what we'd do is we'd do a soft transfer, making sure they had transportation there, that we would help them get to one of the other shelters. One woman, when we told her we were what the are you doing, taking animals into your shelter? You can't do that. And I said, yes, we can, and we are. And she just ranted and raved and said, well, you know, that's crazy. If I want to come to your shelter, I should be able to come to your shelter. And it prompted the discussion that there were actually 3 other shelters that every woman who wanted to go to could go to, and only one shelter, one option for women who have pets. So she actually had 3 times the options of a safe place to be than that one person with the pet who had one option of a safe place to be. And so, you know, we've talked about it, and some of the people who think that it was a crazy idea from that perspective have come around as well. So staff, this is one of the big naysayers. You know, your staff are going to say, you can't do this, and they're going to offer you all sorts of reasons why you can't do this. And just to start with the transition period, regarding staff hired before the decision to become pet friendly was made, some were fully on board, some were equally adamant that we should not and could not. Not that we shouldn't, because we'd been sneaking animals in. Remember, we'd been doing it informally, but that we couldn't do it on a permanent basis. They were against the decision. We needed to continually reinforce that this is the way we were going, and that anything that they had to say against doing it, it was part of their responsibility as an employee of Bethesda House to help us figure out how we could do it, because that's what Bethesda House is going to do. And we worked with their individual concerns, and I'll get to that later as well. Once the hiring process began after the transition period, it was easy, because you just tell everybody who applies for a position that this is a pet-friendly shelter. You will be expected to work in an environment with animals and perhaps help out with them as needed. And if that's okay, then we'll move forward with the interview. And if that's not okay, we wish you well in your job search. You know, and that was it. So the reasons, I think one of you put up all these reasons. Yes, that these are the reasons why you can't have pets in shelter. Staff allergies. Okay, so we looked into airborne saliva and urine protein and how it can, you know, there could be allergic reactions, et cetera, and all sorts of staff said, I have allergies. And so what we did is we said that we were going to address it like any other issue that we would address. We would develop accommodation plans for people with allergies, that we would pay to have very specific allergy tests done at a clinic, that we would work with the doctors in identifying the allergy area. Like, can you be in the same room with animals? Can you be in the same building with animals? Can you be in a room after an animal has been there? So we will work with the medical practitioners to develop an accommodation plan that will suit your needs, keep you safe and healthy from your allergic reaction, and allow you to continue to do the good work that you do. None of the staff who told me they were allergic to allergies took us up on our plan. I think we were being reasonable. We were not saying you can't work here. We were saying we will accommodate you, and nobody took us up on the plan. I am not saying that these people didn't have allergies. I am not putting down the fact that there are truly legitimate allergies. That people have allergic reactions to animals. But it just seemed like at that point in time, the naysayers were just saying this in order to have the program go away. And I don't understand that necessarily, because they had seen when we did bring the animals in informally, the benefits to it. But it just seemed like something that they had to say, you can't do it because of allergies. And it turned out not to be an issue at all. If it was an issue, we were fully prepared to go ahead with accommodation plans. Masks for people, gloves for people, separated. They wouldn't have to do room checks. Like I had a whole plan in place, that things we could choose from for accommodation plans that I didn't have to use. Fear of animals. People do have legitimate fears. We talked about, if you're fearful of animals, well, how far away from an animal can you be? If the animal is on a leash, is it okay? You know, so we talked about people's fears and how it isn't a legitimate reason to not have the animal in. It's a legitimate reason to put another plan in place for you so that you can do your work while you're here. The client allergies and fears, well, that went away as soon as the transition period was over. So because people, if they have allergies and they want to come in, they can come in. If they have allergies and don't, we, again, facilitate another shelter. Animal aggression, Yes, there's a possibility, but the plans are in place. This is what muzzles are for. This is what bringing dog trainers from PetSmart on site or specialists on site. How can we help you, just like we would with your child? If your child was exhibiting behavioral issues because of the trauma, maybe we can bring in pet specialists, help you with that. There's things you can do. Fleas and other bugs. Bed bugs, anybody? We always have those issues to deal with. We'll deal with it. Here are the ways that we can deal with it. Property damage. Well, I've had more women kick in doors than I've had animals do anything to doors since the animals came in. Yes, they could claw and they can chew, and maybe that's telling you that you've left them alone in the bedroom too long. So maybe we solve that by getting you to take the animals out of the bedroom a little bit more often or whatever. So we deal with the issues. Lack of space, as I said, it may be small for a bigger animal, but it's a safe space and it's temporary. Potentially, the animal bites and things, yes, we talked about that. External regulations, I couldn't find any external regulations. In actual fact, I could find regulations that say I had to take animals in, right? Couldn't find anybody, fire department, health department, nobody. As long as basic conditions are met, didn't matter whether an animal was in the shelter or not. Liability, well, I already told you what the lawyer said. He said that contracts really are useless. You do it because it's due diligence, but in actual fact, anybody can sue you for anything. So if you're going to be afraid of somebody suing you because something happens, if you know you're doing the right thing, and that's enough to dissuade you not to do it, then you don't have your head in the right space. Fear of liability, I wouldn't go out the door sometimes at the shelter. We got sued by a woman who found a raccoon in the garbage bin, and she ended up suing us and got $80,000, and we weren't even negligent. So people are going to sue you for anything. So my reframe is naysayers providing you with reasons why you can't do this are being helpful by providing you with areas in which to demonstrate your creativity. Our mantra, it's our job to reduce barriers to women accessing our service. We're protecting women, children, and their pets from abuse, and in some cases, we're saving their lives. I have to admit, there is an unpredicted challenge. This is something that nobody told me about, and I, for some reason, never thought of it. And I think we need to be aware of it, because if other shelters are going to bring animals in with their women, I think we need to have put some thought into this. The intensity of concern and stress staff experience related to animals who are neglected or may potentially be abused by their owners due to their owners' alcohol, drug, and mental health issues, particularly when those owners take the animals with them upon discharge. That's the concern. It's almost as if we've increased the client population in the shelter, that the caregivers want to give care and due concern to everybody in the shelter. We've added a whole level of stress for the staff. We talk about vicarious trauma. Staff are now hearing about the trauma that the animals went through and going home at night and having nightmares about what not just happened to the women and not just what the children observed, but what the pet has gone through. And I think that we have to bump up our level of care and self-care for the staff who are now taking on this degree of intervention in a new area and look after our staff who are doing this. It's hard to maintain a professional distance when moral imperative to do what you think is right for the animal is at odds with the woman's, and I say legal right to ownership, because I know ownership is a key phrase that we have to look into. But legally, from the police department, we're told that that woman has a right to that animal, and the right to the healing support of her pet, even if she might not be able to take the best care of it, even if we know she's leaving the shelter to go back to the partner, or maybe leaving and ending up on the street. She has the moral right to that security that that animal provides her, and we have to balance that against the rights of the animal to be protected. So there's a whole other area that we have to consider that we never even thought of considering. Our challenges, I'm not going to talk a lot about them. There's ways of getting over everything, from changing from smelly wet cat food to dry food to get rid of the smells, increase walks, lots of things. If you get creative, you can figure out a solution. I want to read this letter, and then I want to stop because I want to give time for questions. Laura is our shelter service manager. This is from a staff. It says, "Hi, Jackie and Laura. I want to share with you a discussion I had this week with a client. Prior to me going on vacation last week, during my last shift, I was assisting a client who was struggling with suicidal thoughts. I was trying to get her into Durham Mental Health Services crisis beds, but unfortunately they didn't have a bed available. When my shift ended, staff were still trying to assist her. I was away for a week, and when I returned on Tuesday, I approached her to see how she was since I saw her last. I didn't recognize her. Her appearance had changed significantly. She was wearing her hair down, she was showered, she had clean clothes on, and most importantly, she was smiling and engaging in conversation. I pointed out how well she seemed to be doing compared to when I saw her a week ago. I asked her what she felt had happened to her to help her out of that state. Without hesitation, she replied, Roxy. When she first came to the shelter a couple of weeks before this, we couldn't accommodate her dog. When we were able to bring her dog in, her mood elevated. She felt safe, and most importantly, she had her most trusted companion to care for. She said that she felt she had a reason to live again because Roxy needed her and she needed Roxy. I truly believe our pet program saves lives. Jody. I think that really just summarizes the successes that we've seen with all the women. And Jody started off as being a staff afraid of animals, had never had a pet of her own, and for her to have this type of turnaround just seems amazing. I know that you are going to be able to get a copy of the shelter. I have more quotes at the end that talk about the therapeutic benefits, etc. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. One of the quotes talks about how counseling sessions are so much more open. Women are able to say hard things easier if they have their pet in their lap. Midnight sessions with the animals, laying on her feet while she's in staff office. People are walking into the shelter now and smiling when they see the animals. So it isn't even just the person whose pet it is that are experiencing it. People are walking into the shelter. The whole atmosphere of the shelter has changed. We believe the results we've seen make the challenges we've faced and we're facing worth the effort to overcome. And I'm going to end there.